Good afternoon on what is a warm, bright and sunny day. It is Saturday the 30th of March and I'm in the reading Nook with a nice hot cup of tea and a parcel to continue unboxing. And what I've got here is greatest blunders ever. The history's dumbest mistakes and the people who made them. This is by Ian Whitelaw, published by Aura, 2019. So, an examination of some of the biggest mishaps and miscalculations ever made. Greatest blunders ever features a wealth of humongous historical bloopers and the people who made them, from the murder of Julius Caesar to Napoleon's sale of Louisiana and Hitler's invasion of Russia. This beautifully illustrated book shines a light on the people and personality behind some of history's biggest blunders. And the thing is, what's great about a book about this sort of thing is it makes you think about, well, what would have happened if the blunder hadn't happened? What are the consequences? And you sort of go down the you go down that line of thinking about like an alternate future or history and so on. So there we go. And the other thing is, with a book particularly like this, where it's not looking at any particular one subject in depth, it's kind of pick and choose. You've got lots of different entries there. You can basically, pick the book up, flip through a few pages, and just sort of like delve, as it were. So we've got the introduction, and then when humans domesticate plants and animals, essentially, it's an interesting one to say whether that's a mistake or not, because essentially that's the growth. That's where we kind of build civilization from, and then we move on fairly quickly. So that's failing to let God's people go. The Egyptian pharaoh and the treatment. Essentially, the pharaoh wouldn't accept that God, the Israelites, were the true God, and wouldn't let the Israelites leave Egypt. So, and this is kind of straying a little bit into the fantastical there because of essentially its portrayal in the Bible. It has a historical basis in truth. I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm saying it's sort of like its main interpretation is through the Bible, and that's very much an oral tradition of it. So, anyway, Persia invades Greece, including notes on the marathon race. So, basically, you're really only getting 1, 2, 3, 4 pages per entry, and that's enough to whet your appetite, get you interested in saying what happens next. Of course, Alexander pushes things too far, expanding Alexander's empire, one of the biggest empires in the world, so on. So we're moving through the ancient world. We'll come up to 24 BC and the murder of Julius Caesar. And these are all essentially just short essays. The mistakes choosing Caligula as an emperor, what a monster he was, and this is after a couple of monsters because Tiberius wasn't mad, but wasn't perfect either. And then we move later on into the later Roman Empire as it becomes the Byzantine Empire, as it were, and so on and so on. So this is a collection of events and exploring the ramifications, and coming really up to date with, say, Harold hurrying to meet William at Hastings. French underestimate the English at Agincourt. The Ming Dynasty turns its back on the world. Essentially, China closes itself off from the rest of the world for 4 centuries. The schism caused by excommunication of Martin Luther King. Philip II of Spain launches the Armada. Of calls Charles I's cavalier attitude towards Parliament that would ultimately lead to the English Civil War and his execution. Basically, the only time that seriously that this country has had a revolution, essentially we installed Cromwell as a not monarch for the best part of a decade, and we didn't like it because we didn't like all the religious limitations and conditions we had to live under. People sort of really wanted to celebrate Christmas, for example. So we happily accepted Charles II back with a lot of joy. British troops massacre workers at Peterloo, infamous scene or incident in Manchester, where essentially workers and workers' rights activists congregated for a meeting, and because they were campaigning for better rights of workers, even for essentially the idea of having workers' rights, a union. I mean, that would eventually get people transported to Australia for it with the Tolpuddle Martyrs. But essentially, it was the ruling classes protecting its interests and privileges, and they sent in the militia. Basically would be soldiers, cavalry, which charged the crown. And the thing is, the Peterloo meeting was entirely peaceful. Santa Anna attacks the Alamo, so spreading out. Britain invades Afghanistan. That's 1839. We did it again, and that was a couple of times. We have basically had 3 Afghan wars, as far as I'm aware. Charge of the White Brigade, military blunder, assassination of Tsar Alexander II, essentially because Russia wasn't changing fast enough for those who wanted change. Moving into the 20th century, German Navy sinks Lusitania, big mistake because that brought the United States into the war. Treaty of Versailles, because that had major ramifications that would ultimately lead to, or contribute heavily to World War II. And its causes: Stalin's 5-year plan, the collectivization, and again we can return to Russia with Hitler's invasion. So you've got little mini essays. These are a little bit longer, 6 pages and so on. Japan's entry into World War II, attacks Pearl Harbor, partition of India and the chaos that caused and its ramifications are still being felt today. Vietnam War, France attempted to hold on to Algeria, basically parallel with Vietnam War to some extent. Plague of the Bay of Pigs. 1968 protests in France. Expulsion of the Asian community from Uganda by Idi Amin, which was actually good for our economy because it brought over a lot of the middle classes from Uganda, and they settled in places like Leicester, and improved the economy because they wanted to work and create businesses and so on. Watergate affair, it destroyed his reputation. Argentina invades Falklands, which would lead to the downfall of the ruling junta. Basically the cause of the First Gulf War. Introduction of the poll tax. one of the few times where, in modern times, where we've had riots that weren't community-based, as it were. During the 80s, we had a lot of riots that were community-based. They're essentially with black communities protesting about their poor treatment by general society in general, but the police in particular. But this was a general. This was sort of cut across all of society. And then basically still in the 20th century, but coming to the end, failure to prevent the genocide in Rwanda. That's still having repercussions in this country because essentially Rwanda is a peaceful country, but yeah, we have government policy which is essentially that we should forcibly deport migrants here illegally to Rwanda, and that is incredibly controversial. Massacre at Srebrenica in the Yugoslavian Civil War, and then repealing the Glass-Steagall Act. This gets a little bit again deregulation of the Financial Act, coming up to the attack on the Twin Towers. An ecological disaster, Deepwater Horizon blowout. Building reactors in Japan's earthquake zone, and that's the most recent great disaster, and that's 2011. You kind of wonder what the book might include next. We have a list of further reading, and then the index. And picture credits. So about as up to date as it possibly could be. You wonder, essentially, as I say, what would happen, what would be included in the past decade or so. I could probably make some suggestions. But yeah, I mean, interesting. So something interesting to dip into and read and find out a little bit more about before you go and investigate and research further. That's greatest blunders ever. So, hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. If you have, then please do click on the like button down below. And of course, if you've got any comments or feedback, I do appreciate you taking the time to post those. And lastly, if you want to be alerted to get more unboxing in the Nook, where you will see me out here with a box containing a book or game which I'll unbox and chat about to the best extent of my knowledge for roughly 10 minutes or so, all of course accompanied by a nice hot cup of tea, then please do click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks again for watching another unboxing in the Nook. I will be back again soon with another one. Bye for now.